I create a simple and doable action plan for the day. Simple and doable because simple calms the nervous system. Simple brings the nervous system out of fear and into safety. Fear and complication go together. Fear stimulates our nervous system to complicate things, and things that feel complicated stimulate fear. So simplicity helps bring our nervous system into a more regulated state. Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to another solo episode with me. And as I get started, to help my nervous system and to help model it for you, I'm just going to say what's present, which is that I feel nervous. I feel nervous to get on the recording. So if there is something that you are working up to doing and if you feel nervous about doing it, that's okay. You're in very good company. And that actually has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about today, because today's episode is about how to get things done. How to get things done when you have a sensitive nervous system or a distracted mind. And I kind of feel like that's another way of saying how to get things done when you are alive, when you are a human being. I decided to record an episode on this because it's something that a lot of you have asked me about. A lot of you, my clients, my listeners, folks who reach out to me on Instagram, have asked me questions about how to get stuff done. You may be aware that I have a podcast. You are aware because you're listening to it right now. I've got a podcast. I have a weekly newsletter that I send out. If you are not already subscribed, you can go to my website, annaholtzman.com, and join in. I have an Instagram account where I'm frequently publishing new content. And of course, I work with clients in my coaching practice as well as a therapy practice. And I'm also, a person with a life, a home, 3 cats that I take care of, a husband and stepdaughter that I do things with, and, whatever. Paperwork to do, taxes to pay, and all of that stuff. Well, tax time is coming up. That's a to-do I loathe and dread, like probably most of you. But anyway, all that to say that I frequently get messages from people, from some of you, saying like, how do you do all that stuff? How do you manage to get all of that stuff done? And, I don't have a magic solution for getting stuff done, but what I do have is a system that I've developed that works for me. And so I thought I would just share it with you. And I bet there's going to be some things about my system that you might want to borrow, just like there might be things about your system that I'd want to borrow. So I thought I would start off by just acknowledging how hard and how frustrating it feels when there is something that we want to get done, something that we want to do or accomplish or engage in that feels really important to us. That feels like we feel some urgency around it, where it's like we feel some passion, some longing around it. We really want to do this thing, but we feel stuck, overwhelmed, distracted, pulled away from it. I think that that's an experience that everyone has experienced at some point or another. And maybe many of us have experienced it many times. Perhaps you're experiencing it right now. And if you are, I can totally relate. I mean, for one thing, because I'm also a human being, and I think we all can relate. Um, and maybe it's helpful if I just acknowledge what that feels like for me, and maybe you'll see some of this reflected in in how you feel. And if so, I hope that um I hope it's validating to know that you're not alone in feeling that way. So I'll use an example that happens to be very present for me at the moment. I want to write a book. And I've been wanting to write a book for years. I don't even know for how long. That desire has come up at different points in my life and in different incarnations. The topic of what the book would be has changed over the years. The desire has come and gone and come back again. And in the past few years, that desire has felt stronger and stronger. Um, and some of you listeners have reached out to me with requests for me to write a book, which I have to say have felt so validating and encouraging and exciting and light me up. And I am struggling with it. I am struggling with it right now. So last year, I decided was going to be the year that I would write this book. And I have two things to say about that. Um, One thing I'll say about that is that I didn't write the book last year. But the other thing I'll say is, hey there, self. I notice that you're using language that causes your nervous system to feel discouraged. And so I'm also going to rephrase that and say, I've been working on this book for years. I've been amassing not only tons of writing, but also just tons of thought and life experience and processing and understanding that are all a part of working on this book. So I have been and am working on the book. Um, but how does it feel? You know, I've already kind of launched into this, I guess. How does it feel when we are feeling stuck? And so I'll describe how it feels for me. It can feel frustrating. I can feel overwhelmed at times. I can feel like I've got just like so many different ideas and I'm not sure if they all really go together. So then it's like option paralysis. Um, I can feel like very confused. Like, I know I want to write a book, but what is it even going to be on? Somewhere deep down in there, I think I know what it's going to be about, but because there's fear there, that fear manifests as confusion. And I feel like my head is swirling in a whirlwind, and there's just like, I can't hear anything. I can't see anything. There's just swirling, swirling, swirling. Maybe I should just stop thinking about this. And then the energy drops and I feel lethargic. And I'm like, what? This is just making me feel bad. So let me just focus on something else. So I feel distracted. I feel pulled away from it. Um, and then that longing comes back, that whisper comes back. It's like, no, I have this need, I have this feeling, I have this urge. And then it's like, frustration, frustration. Why am I not acting on this in the way that I want to be acting on this with clarity and a plan? Um, and then the imposter syndrome thoughts come in like, well, who do you even think you are? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, the imposter syndrome thoughts are just so they're so cliche. They just tend to say the same exact things to everybody that they're saying it to. You know, who do you think you are? You have nothing to say. Your life's not interesting. Your thoughts aren't interesting. Blah, 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 blah. So I wonder if some of that feels familiar to you. Maybe it's a slightly different flavor for you. But I think this is a fairly common description of a common human experience. These waves are whirlwinds of fear that can manifest in confusion, distraction, self doubt, self deprecation, all of those things, feeling pulled away, lethargy, punctuated by then those urges, those tugs, those longings, and the tension between the fear and the longing can feel like intense frustration. And then when we feel the frustration, we just want to push through it, push through it, push through it, use discipline. And for most of us, that doesn't work very well. Well, I'll just say for me, it doesn't work very well. And if you are an avid listener of this podcast, um, I kind of have a hunch that that's probably not the path that tends to work smoothly for you either. Maybe I'm wrong. So I want to pause here. I've been describing what it feels like to be in the thick of it, in the inside of it, that frustration. And I want to pause here and take a nice, long, slow breath and a slow step back. And I want to zoom out to a bird's eye view of the experience that I just described. And what I'm doing as I take that long, slow breath and I'm slowing down the beating of my heart and I'm imagining and visualizing taking a physical step back, changing my location, changing my viewpoint, adjusting my perspective. What I'm doing is I'm interacting with and shifting on purpose my nervous system state. Because the nervous system state that I was describing previously and that I was attuning with because I was describing it is a state of fear or a threat response. It's a stress state. Like if there's a switch on our nervous system between danger mode and safety mode, that was a description and demonstration of the danger mode setting that our nervous system is capable of and that our nervous system needs for very important reasons. Because when we find ourselves in an emergency, our nervous system needs to go into the emergency setting so that it can carry out emergency functions. And oftentimes, when we feel a tug from our passion, from our purpose, from that place in ourselves that feels deeply and intensely about something, that feels a strong sense of purpose and connection to something, that intensity can often get interpreted by our nervous system as an emergency. Our nervous system often and easily interprets intensity as emergency. And so when it feels that tug of the longing to connect with our purpose, in a strong way. It can interpret that tug as an alarm bell, and it can go into emergency mode. And in that emergency mode, it can behave like a dog running in circles around, a room where there's like an alarm going off, and it's running around in circles looking for the door. Um, and when our nervous system is in that state, it may behave in all of the ways I just previously described: distraction, um, spiraling, self critical talk, self doubt, fear. And oftentimes it'll go into like a hyper frenzy of all of that stuff, option paralysis, and then it'll burn itself out because that level of that highly energized state is not sustainable. So it'll go into a frenzy, then it'll burn itself out energetically, and it'll collapse into apathy, dissociation, depression, those kind of low detached states. So those states, there's nothing wrong with them morally. They are states that are functional in certain situations, but they're not states that are conducive to expansive thought, to the emergence of creativity, of ideas, of taking action in a clear, focused, and self connected way, in a creative way. And so it's understandable that we find ourselves in these whirlwinds of distraction and spiraling. And it's not a flaw. It's not a sign that we weren't cut out for whatever it is we want to do. It's not a sign that we're lazy, a term that I think should be removed from our lexicon completely, because I think it's just a pejorative judgment. Um, it's just a nervous system state. That is all it is. So that right there, what I just described, is a shift in perception that has majorly changed the way that I move through the world and has majorly changed the way that I go about getting things done. That shift from viewing the nervous system reactivity symptoms of distraction and overwhelm and shutdown, from viewing them as a flaw in myself to simply viewing them as an understandable nervous system state. That shift in perception has changed a lot for me. It has not eradicated fear and overwhelm and confusion from my life, quite the contrary, but it has changed the way that I respond to those experiences. And again, I'm not perfect at that either. That's not what it's about. And the idea that the goal should be responding perfectly is actually a fear-fueled expectation. So that said, I want to talk about how my approach has shifted since I've made this shift in perception. And maybe there are things in what I'm about to describe that you're already doing. And maybe there will be some things that feel new to you and that you might want to try out and play around with and see how they work for you. See how parts of it work for you. Maybe parts of it don't. Maybe parts of it just give you an idea about how you might do things, not the same as me, but in a new way that perhaps you hadn't thought of before. So the one overarching, most important shift that I have made, which is a work in progress, and I'm still working on it, is that I have stopped pushing myself when things get hard. And instead, when things get hard, I stop to regulate myself. I'm going to use a metaphor here of a car with an empty gas tank. So the way that I previously was used to doing things is that I'd be metaphorically, because I don't really drive, but metaphorically I'd be that's a whole nother story. Metaphorically, I'd be driving my car, and the gas tank would be getting emptier and decreasing, decreasing, decreasing until it was at empty, and then the car would start stalling and not going forward in the way I was expecting it to go. And so I would just slam even harder onto the gas pedal. And I would keep slamming harder and harder on the gas pedal as the gas tank became emptier and emptier. And we all know how that goes. And I think we all know how that feels. It feels really awful. It feels frustrating. It can feel physically painful, certainly emotionally and mentally painful. We're like at war with ourselves in that place. And it sucks, to put it simply. So that was my old way of doing things. And I think that's a lot of people's old way of doing things because it's not something that's unique necessarily to any individual. I think this has been a cultural pattern for a long time. It's just kind of something we absorb through osmosis. The new way of doing things that I am practicing, and again, it's a work in progress, is that when I notice that the car is starting to slow down, I stop to look at the gas tank and I see, oh, the gas needs to be refilled. So even though I need and want to get to my destination, I know for a fact that I am not going to get there faster by just jamming on the gas pedal. If I want to get there in decent time, I actually need to pull off the route. I need to slow down. If I want to get there in decent time, I need to slow down and stop to refuel the gas tank. It's simple when it comes to cars, but it gets a lot more complicated when it comes to ourselves just because we've been conditioned and programmed not to see things that way. So it just takes intention and repetition and reminding ourselves and reminding each other over and over again to zoom out and see the situation differently from how we've been looking at it. So that's the overarching shift that I've made that has really made such a difference in the way I move through life and get things done. Um, and now I'm going to kind of break down for you how I get things done on a day by day basis. Not because I think I have the one and only perfect formula for this. I've come up with a formula that works well for me, but because I think it's helpful to hear from other people how they do this so we can take and mix and match and synthesize our own ideas of things to try out. So what I do is, first of all, I start each day with a check-in with myself. And sure, it's not every single day. I mean, life is not perfect. Sometimes things get in the way. But when I can, and it is most days, I start my day by checking in with myself. And I do this with a journaling practice that I've developed, synthesized from all kinds of different methods. And I call that the melt through method. And I describe it in great detail in episode 56 of this podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to that at some point, it's episode 56, in which I describe in detail the melt through method. But just in a brief summary of it, it's uh, it's a journaling practice that is a way for me to tap into my inner guidance by first connecting with my fear. And then, as my fear softens, the doorway opens for me to connect with my inner guidance. And it's very important for me to do that once a day at the beginning of the day because life is distracting and pinging and triggering, and all of these different stimuli will pull our attention away from what matters to us, will ping our nervous systems in ways that send us into fight and flight and freeze and appease, and that will pull us away from what actually matters to us. So I'm not going to stay in constant connection with my inner guidance throughout every moment of every day. But I know that if I have an intentional check in point at the beginning of every day, it's like throughout the day, I'm wandering through the forest. I'm hopefully following the trail that I wanted to follow. But whether or not I actually am, I know that in the morning, I'm going to consult my compass once again to make sure that in the long term, I'm heading to where I want to be heading. And where I want to be heading, by the way, may change over time. It does change over time. And I find out how it's changing and what it's changing to by checking in with myself, by having a regular check in point where I am coming back to what is it that actually matters to me? What is it that I actually want to be doing with this precious time that I have on planet Earth? So that's how I start my day, checking in with my inner guidance through journaling. The second thing I do, and the way I'm describing this, by the way, it makes it sound so much more linear than the way it usually happens, but I'm breaking it down so that you, the listener, can actually make some sense of this. It tends to look a lot more all over the place in practice. But essentially, the second thing that I do is I create a simple and doable action plan for the day. Simple and doable because simple calms the nervous system. Simple brings the nervous system out of fear and into safety. Fear and complication go together. Fear stimulates our nervous system to complicate things, and things that feel complicated stimulate fear. So simplicity helps bring our nervous system into a more regulated state. So I create a simple and doable action plan, and it's doable because if I put things on this list that are like too many things, or the things are too big and I'm never realistically going to be able to get them done, that also sends my nervous system into danger mode because it feels overwhelmed. I feel mad at myself, feel like I'm failing. And when my nervous system is in danger mode, it's very hard to get things done because I feel shut down or I'm freaking out. So I create a simple and doable action plan. And the way that I do this is two steps. First, I do a brain dump of all of the things that are coming to my mind that I, A, want to get done, and B, need to get done. And when I say need, in terms of like keeping the lights on, that kind of thing. So I do a brain dump and then I prioritize. Like, what are the things that are actually the most important to me in a purpose centered way that I want to and can realistically get done today? Is it like writing one page of this book? Is it something else? And then what are like the most important things that I actually do need to get done today? Like, like if it's tax day, like I need to get the taxes done today or I'm going to get fined, that sort of thing. So I put the most essential for what's important to my heart, and also the most essential for keeping me like safe and keeping things running in the world. Um, and anything that either does not absolutely need to get done today, or that will be too much for me to do today and will just send me into overwhelm, I take off that list. I put it in a pile for later. So that's how I create a simple and doable action plan. And the next element of my system is that I honor my most energized time of day, and I allocate that time for the things that are most meaningful to me. So for me, mornings are my most energized times. Like, I'm a morning person. I didn't used to be, but these days I am a morning person. That's when I feel most alive, most awake, most creative, most present. And so that is the time that I devote to deep creative work, because that is the kind of energy that I need in order to do deep creative work. I can't do deep creative work when I'm feeling low energy. And by low energy, by the way, I mean, like there are days when I feel low energy, but the morning of that day is going to be my most fruitful time, even of that low energy day. Because later on, I'm going to be, bleh. And then in the lower energy part of the day, which for me is like the later afternoon, that's the time that I reserve for, I call that autopilot time. It's like I can still do things, I just can't really be creative during that time. And so that's time that I reserve for admin tasks like answering emails, um, maybe prepping to do my taxes on another day when I reserve the whole day for that, because that's a whole thing I need to like get my energy prepared for. But yeah, I prioritize my most energized time of day for the things that are truly meaningful to me. Otherwise, the things that I care about most will never get any love or attention and will never actually happen. And the next thing that is important for me to getting things done has a lot to do with the first thing I talked about, is that I stop pushing myself when things get hard. And instead of pushing when things get hard, I stop to regulate myself. So what does this look like in practice? And again, this is a work in progress. I've gotten a lot better at this in recent years, and I continue to develop this. But I recharge before I crash. So I'm not saying this never happens anymore, but in the old days, this was very routine. I would just like push and push and push. And when things get hard, what that looks like is like, let's say I'll be working on, let's just say, a newsletter, writing a newsletter, and then I start to like feel like I'm hitting a block, like I'm trying to express a particular thing, but I'm just like not finding the words that I want to use. And the more I furrow my brow and like tense my shoulders and fingers and strain, the harder it is to access the words that I want to say. That's one version of it. Another version of it for me is, again, like I'm trying to write a newsletter and I have a particular topic I want to write it on, but I am just getting distracted like crazy. Like the internet is distracting the shit out of me. It's just like every 2 seconds I'm checking my phone and looking on Instagram, or I'm looking up random things on ChatGPT, or like every time I see that an email's coming in, I'm like, oh no, I'll go read this first. And it's just like, ugh, an hour has gone by and I've literally gotten nothing done. It's just been distraction land. That's another way that it can look for me when things start to get hard. So when I notice that I'm starting to feel really pulled away and distracted, or I'm starting to just really struggle to find the next word that I want to write, or I'm starting to feel tension in my shoulder. I'm starting to feel restless. I'm starting to feel tired, fatigued. Instead of continuing to jam on the gas pedal, which will bring me to a place I do not want to be. It can bring me into a headache. It could bring me into um, just like a really deep fatigue that's hard to get out of. It can bring me into a spiral of negative thinking that's hard to get out of, all kinds of not fun experiences. So instead of continuing to hit the gas pedal when I start to notice these signs, I pause and I sometimes literally will say out loud to myself, I don't really say it out loud, but I'll say it in my head. I'll say, oh, my nervous system is getting tired, or my nervous system is getting overwhelmed. I need to go to the gas station. Like nothing is going to get done right now if I don't stop to regulate or if I don't stop to refuel. And at that point, I stop what I'm doing and I'm very grateful and ecstatic that I have built a career where I get to be my own boss and my own time manager. Because back when I was working in reality TV, was would have been much harder to do this. Although there still are ways, there absolutely are ways of doing this in little increments, even when you're in a more structured work environment. But it's certainly easier, a lot easier, when you work for yourself. To stop, pause, say, okay, my nervous system is tired and overwhelmed. It's overstimulated. And then I do something that replenishes me. I do something that helps me reset, that helps me recharge. And for me personally, that thing is most often taking a walk. I'll take a walk outside, even if it's really cold outside. I just, my body, my nervous system needs to take a walk. And so most often what I'll do is I'll take a walk. Sometimes I need more than just a short walk. Sometimes I need to take a long walk. Sometimes I need to just like let everything go for the whole rest of the day so that I can come back to it recharged tomorrow. Sometimes I need to do something that for me is fun. Like there's this little cafe bakery near where I live, and I just find it really fun to be there. Sometimes I go there, have like a cup of tea or something. Sometimes it's as simple as, you know what, this would be a really great time to break for lunch anyway. So why don't I break now and go have my lunch, which I needed to do anyway. And then I can come back feeling reset. But other times I need more than that to recharge. Sometimes I need to reach out to a friend and have a conversation. So it really varies from day to day. And finally, a very, very essential element of how to get stuff done consistently for me is I have to schedule in joy and restoration. If I this is just how I personally operate. If I do not schedule it in, if I don't schedule in things like this one Friday a month, I'm going to take the day off and go into the city and go to a museum. This weekend, I'm going to make brunch plans with a couple of friends. This day, I'm going to go take a trip to the ocean and walk on the boardwalk. Whatever that thing is, at this afternoon, I'm going to go get a massage. If I don't schedule it into my calendar, it's not that it won't happen at all. It will, but it will not happen at the amount or frequency that I need it to happen in order for me to recharge myself and stay recharged enough to maintain consistency in my life and in getting the things done that matter to me. So I need to schedule in joy and restoration. So that's my very loose system of how to get things done in any given day. Um, and something that there are so many productivity tips out there, and some of them work great for some people, and many of them don't work great for other people. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about one of those productivity tips that works for some people, but doesn't happen to work for me. And I'll explain why and what I do instead. Um, so, a lot of folks find using timed intervals of work to be very helpful. And if you're someone who finds this helpful, that is fantastic. Whatever works for you is great in my book. Um, what I mean by timed intervals, like one method is like setting a 20-minute timer and then working for 20 minutes. And at the end of 20 minutes, the timer goes off, and that's your signal to take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break or whatever it is. And then come back and do another 20-minute interval and go back to taking a short break. So I know this is something that a lot of people love and swear by, and that's fantastic. And for me personally, timed intervals are not my thing. I don't like them, not on a moral level, just personally. It just personally doesn't vibe with me. And the reason is that for me, those timed intervals feel rigid to my nervous system. And what my nervous system needs from me is attunement. For my nervous system to feel safe, it needs to know that I'm attuning to it, I'm paying attention to it. Just like a little kid who's playing on the playground, and every few moments they'll look back to the parent to see, are you attuning with me? Are you watching me? Are you checking in with me? Are you noticing if I'm okay or not okay? So my nervous system, in order to feel safe, it needs that attunement from me. It needs to know that I'm paying attention, and it needs to know that my nervous system, when it's feeling energized and it's running through the playground and it's like climbing on the monkey bars, it needs to know that I'm supporting that I'm saying, great, you're feeling energized. Awesome. I'm right here. Uh, do your thing, write your essay, express your creativity, do your work. And it also needs to know that when it starts to feel tired, that I'm also paying attention to that. And I'm not going to slam on the gas pedal. It needs to know that I'm paying attention and noticing the signs and saying, "Oh, okay, I see. You're talking to me through the shoulder tension. You're talking to me through the yawn. You're talking to me through the starting to feel distracted. So I'm paying attention. I'm here. You are not being ignored or overridden. And now let's take a break." My nervous system needs me to be attuning to it in the present moment. And if I'm using those timed intervals, while they may work fantastically for someone else, and that's wonderful, my nervous system interprets that as that I'm imposing a rigid structure that is not about attuning with it, but it's just like a pre-existing prescription. And again, if this works for you, then you're probably not interpreting it that way, and that's fantastic. My nervous system does interpret it as rigid, and so for me, I need a more flexible system of simply attuning, checking in, and responding to my own nervous system cues. And one of the things that I think can be most challenging in this whole constellation of productivity and really like in this culture that I say we live in. I mean, I live in the United States. You might not live here, but you might still relate to living in a culture that really prizes productivity and deprioritizes rest. And so I find that one of the things, because I and many of us are just so programmed in this way to put productivity up on on a pedestal, and also to put rest down in a category that doesn't get much love. Um, Something that I continuously am working on and have to remind myself is to shift my perception there and to recognize that hibernation is actually a key, essential part of the productivity cycle. Like, can you imagine if a bear refused to hibernate or resisted hibernation, was like, no, I got to keep getting things done, like, and they just stressed themselves out all winter and were like beating themselves up all winter for not getting things done. By the time spring came around, the bear would be depleted, exhausted, it would probably be sick and having physical ailments, it would be de-energized, and it probably not be capable of doing whatever it is that bears do in the spring. And we as humans don't have the same exact cycle as bear necessarily. But we do have hibernation cycles, and we do have modulations in energy. And if we respect those modulations, and if we don't fight the hibernation cycles, but rather honor them and allow them and go with them and flow with them, those cycles of hibernation are there for a reason. They recharge us, they keep the whole cycle going, and they allow the consistent productivity over time to continue to happen. So I spoke about a whole bunch of things today that all have to do with working with and not against our energy to help us do the things that we actually want to do, that matter to us, that we are longing to do. Um, and I spoke about a whole bunch of different things. And it's quite possible that as you're listening to this, you may be pulling little strands of inspiration, ideas, things you might want to try. And you may also possibly be feeling a bit overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, you just spoke about so many different things, so many things to try, like so many mindset shifts to make. Like, overwhelming. Where do I even begin? And if that is the case for you, first of all, that's a completely normal thing to be feeling and experiencing. And if that's what you're experiencing right now, I lovingly encourage you, after you finish listening to this podcast, to, or even right now, to take a pause, take a breath, take a step back, let it all digest and integrate, take a break, have a snack, go do something else for a while. And start small. That's what this is all about. Start small, break it down, declutter your to-do list when it comes to reprogramming how you get things done. Just choose one small, simple, doable thing to start playing around with in a light-hearted, exploratory way. One small shift. You think about the spokes of a wheel. One small shift at the center of those spokes leads to bigger shifts as things reverberate. And I would say, if I were to recommend a starting spot, I would offer to start with that one simple mindset shift of, when things are getting hard, you're starting to feel distracted, starting to feel tired, to take a pause, notice how you're talking to yourself about what you're experiencing. And if you find that you are thinking of those signs of overwhelm or fatigue as a personal flaw or a problem, just take a moment to shift that self-talk and say, oh, this is a nervous system state. My nervous system is simply feeling overwhelmed right now and needs a refresh, needs to recharge. Just try out that self-talk experiment and see how it feels. And I'd love to hear what you notice. I'd love it if you would check in with me and let me know how it goes. You can always write me an email at anna@annaholtzman.com. You can send me a message on Instagram. I'm there at Anna_Holtzman. And if this way of moving through overwhelm so that you can actually connect with the things that are most deeply important to you, that feel most purposeful for you, that feel like they are the things that give life meaning for you and that you actually want to be engaging in, if you'd like support with that, reach out to me. That is what I help people with as a coach, and I'd love to chat. So again, you can connect with me by email or by Instagram, or you can visit my website, annaholtzman.com. Thank you for listening, dear listeners. I'm sending you so much love and encouragement. Be gentle with yourself, be loving with yourself, and your nervous system will feel safer so that it can do the creative work that you are here to do. Take care. I'll see you soon. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.